Pierpont said to me? He said, well, yeah, that is something, yeah, I don't know much about that. You get your men to look at it, and I'm sure I can get my men to look at it too. Now, I took that as very insulting. If I'm the President of the United States and I'm concerned about Northern Securities, doesn't that big walrus need to be concerned about Northern Securities? And so I instructed my Attorney General, Philander Knox, to take out antitrust legislation against J. Pierpont Morgan, and we busted his trust. That is, we broke it up. You might remember the Sherman Antitrust Act. And here I am taking him on, I was a wrestler. And I even had a Japanese sumo wrestler around the White House for a while. I was wrestling with him, big guy with pajamas on. Or it looks like a diaper, actually. Have you ever seen a sumo wrestler? But in any case, so I took on the big guy. I won. Modern presidency, modern influence. I also took on the anthracite coal mine owners in 1902. There was an important shortage of this new kind of coal, which was burned way better than bituminous. Institutions were going cold in the north. The owners in Pennsylvania were not compromising with their workers. And I forced the owners to compromise with their workers. This is totally unlike the 19th century. The forgettable presidents would call out the troops to put down disorder from the working class. I threatened the owners by coming up with the troops to occupy the mines if they could not come to a settlement. This is why Joe Cannon, the Speaker of the House, said that Theodore Roosevelt has as much respect for the Constitution as a tomcat has for a marriage license. Couldn't really do this, but my charisma now was seeping through. People adored me. This was the time of the newspapers. I was always the center of things. I gave out great copy. The newspapers loved me. I was the one who gave the word to our vocabulary known as lunatic fringe to describe extreme political parties. I was the one who first said clean as a hound's tooth. I had a lot of arresting concepts. I was the first one who said flubbed up, mollycoddle. Don't you pussyfoot around me. I made up that term. So I attracted attention, and I took on the big guys, and I got them. I won a landslide election in 1904, and went from there to enact what I call my square deal. A square deal for the American people. Now we're about to talk about some real progressive type of legislation. It's for the people, it's against the special interests, and I think you can see here why. Think of a square as having 4 sides, having 4 major planks to it. One of them would undoubtedly be the Meat Inspection Act. We talked a little bit about Upton Sinclair stigmatizing the stockyards of Chicago. Well, I did something about it. I got through a Meat Inspection Act, which has created today a federal commission of inspectors that you even have here in Mount Pleasant, in Pilgrim's Pride. People who are paid by the government, not by the company. And they're supposed to be uncorruptible. To check to make sure that your meat is pure. That's meat. That's good for the people against the special interests that might just allow a rat to be ground up and wouldn't look the other way. Same thing with the Drug Act. Aspirin are coming out this time, but is aspirin safe? Does it really work? Well, now we have drug testing by the government to determine whether something should be on the market. Something on the basis of science, pragmatism. That's the key, if it's going to be good or not. I was the one who regulated railroads even more. Grover Cleveland had signed a bill that had created the Interstate Commerce Act. I was the one who created the Hepburn Act, where I said you can't give drawbacks anymore to Rockefeller. You can't give special prices to people. You have to have a maximum rate in certain areas. So we began to look at the books of the railroad companies and stop the sweetheart deals. Finally, conservation. There was a media mogul at this time, William Randolph Hearst, who we'll talk about next time, who wanted to buy the whole Grand Canyon for himself. Called the William Randolph Hearst Canyon. Well, I didn't like that. I thought the people should have the first choice of the great sights of the West, and Therefore, I got 150 million acres purchased in a conservation program. And I took the Grand Canyon right away from William Jennings Hearst and gave it to the people where it is today, with our public parks system. You see how this is a square deal? How we are fighting against various corporate private interests for the good of the public. We are creating a strong presidency, a strong government that can regulate, can fix maximum prices in some cases, can throw some things off the market. All this is really aimed at the big corporate bigwigs who had overshadowed those forgettable presidents of the late 19th century. Well, I was so charismatic and so powerful by 1908 that I could have had just about anyone serve after me. Like Julius Caesar, who trusted fat men, I decided to trust this fat man from Yale, William Howard Taft. He was, as I soon learned, a too conservative judge from Cincinnati, Ohio, with a very ambitious wife by the name of Helen. I went to bat with him and cornered me one day, wondering if I would appoint her Bill as president. I got a little carried away and I said, "Bully, that is a good idea, isn't it?" Well, I thought I could trust Bill. But as it turned out, when I went over to Africa to hunt animals, since I didn't want to stay in the public eye too long, as president, I might do something great. I was kind of walking on the clouds by the time I left in 1908. But Big Bill betrayed me. Now, the guy weighed 260 pounds. He had to have a special bathtub installed in the White House. He couldn't even, pick up his ball on a putting green. He liked to play golf. But he also betrayed me. He began to lease out the lands that I held for the people to private interest groups. He began to look down his nose on labor. He had too many friends in the Congress, too many bosses. I came back after bagging animals, very upset with what Taft was doing to the country. And by the way, during my safari days in Africa, I did hunt big game, and I will advise you not to hunt rhinos unless you are armed with bear, basically, against them, because I was almost killed by a rhino. I put 9 bullets in a rhino. And would you know that rhino just stopped 1 foot of killing me? It took 9 bullets to bring that beast down while I was in Africa. But anyway, I heard of this, and I came roaring back, and I had a confrontation with Big Bill. And I said, "What are you doing, Bill?" And he gushed and said something stupid like, "Gosh, Teddy, you've done more for my election than anybody except for my brother Tom." I was the one who got him elected. What is he talking about? Well, I should have been the Republican nominee in 1908. Or 1912, I mean. I should have taken Taft out. But would you know at this time there was a progressive idea about electing a party leader. It's called the primary system, where voters of a certain party decide who they want. And in every one of the primaries, I won. This was something that Lincoln Steffens advocated. The voters having more control. Big, massive political change. That was his bag. But there were still a lot of states who determined their leader by conventions. These were controlled by the party bosses, and in every case, Big Bill won those. Well, saying that I felt as strong as a bull moose, I decided to take off from Big Bill and form my own party in 1912. They called it the Bull Moose Party. At one point in Milwaukee, I was even shot by an anarchist, John Schrank. So it looked like another person was going to die because of this Black Flag menace. But I turned the tables on them because I kept the bullet in me. I finished my speech. I took 30 minutes. I knew I wasn't coughing blood, which is a good sign. Kept the bullet, and I concluded my speech by saying, "Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if you know this, but I have been shot." You would have thought that this, again, a brush up with life and death, and my survivability would have ensured a great deal of charisma. But the problem was that I was dividing the Republican vote. And although I bested Big Bill, he only won the state of Utah and Vermont. I won all these green states because the Republican ticket was in effect divided. The Democrats were able to win, and this pointy-haired pointy-headed intellectual, former Princeton president from the South, from Virginia, Woodrow Wilson, was able to come into office. Woodrow Wilson was a product of a kind of perfect Victorian home. He'd always gotten straight A's on his report card. He'd always gone out with good girls. He always said his prayers. He always went to church. He was a believer, unlike me. But he ran and won, of course, because of the divided Republican vote. Now, I was the first progressive. I created more power for the people, more power for the president. I was the one who strengthened the democracy by showing how important primaries were against these private party conventions. I strengthened the hand of the executive against the private interests. Woodrow Wilson piggybacked on top of that idea. He was a very erudite, studious man who knew the Congress, had written a book about congressional government. And he gets through a number of acts which were very influential, but which I thought were ill-timed or ill-conceived. But let me go through them because they were far-reaching, and it will help bring this lecture here to a close. These are very important things. They all have to do with money. They all have to do, again, with private interests. Income tax. Income tax, 1913. The idea of, you know, as I pull out it, my dad, I've been giving away too much money. Income tax starts out. Before this, 1913, the government's big income was tariffs. But tariffs hurt poor people and protected big businesses. Now Wilson had lower tariffs. I did not necessarily support this because I thought that big business needed to be regulated, not killed off. But in any case, Wilson gets a lower tariff and he substitutes the income tax. The income tax becomes then the big generator of wealth for the government. At first, the income tax only went after rich people, rich businessmen. But World War I would see to it that the middle class would take a hit as well after that. But this is just 1913. So we have income tax. That's a huge change in the way government does things. It, of course, strengthens the executive, strengthens the progressive liberal idea. Income tax, 1913. We also have the Federal Reserve Act. If you look at your money, you can see that it says Federal Reserve System on your money. And this is because we have a new system in 1913 where the federal government joins up with main bankers and decentralizes banking. This is another hit on Pierpont and the Morgan family and the whole House of Morgan control concept. Now the government and leading bankers together establish decentralized 12 Federal Reserve banks. And they are all over the country, not just in New York. So poor people have more access to collateral. Does anyone know where our Federal Reserve Bank is? We still have it today. What's that, Norma? Oh, okay. It's in Dallas. It's 5 stories tall. It's never been robbed, and it loans out money to like Guaranty Bank and Pilgrim Bank and the local banks. It also sets a discount rate, which is the interest rate that it charges member banks. So this helps to determine the interest rate for society. If society is getting overheated, they can raise the discount rate, which raises interest rates, which makes it more difficult to get money. But if the economy is really going slow, they can lower the discount rate, like they've been doing for some time now. They try to make money more appealing because you don't have to pay such a big interest on it if you loan it. So it was also a way to try to control the economy, the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. So we got income tax, we got the Federal Reserve, decentralized banking, taking money out of rich people and their income taxes, and finally we have the Federal Trade Commission. We talked about the Interstate Commerce Commission regulating trains. The Federal Trade Commission regulates business in general. So it vastly increases the regulatory power of government. This is in 1914, but 100 years later, if you think Walmart is ripping you off, say to them that you're going to write a letter with a lot of specifics about how they're ripping you off to the Federal Trade Commission, and that will scare them. Because this is the Federal Regulatory Commission that is going against corruption in business. So, an important step, again, to making government now the center. The way liberals like it. Government is going to be the focus for change, for a better tomorrow. Progressives are baby liberals. I was a progressive. Woodrow Wilson was a different kind of progressive. We'll maybe talk about that a little bit. But basically, the same kind of things are happening. We've got the corporate private interests being throttled, new public emerging. So you can see that though I was defeated in the 1912 election, though, I wasn't out of the game yet. Indeed, I tried to get back at Wilson because he proved to be a kind of pacifist and a flub-dub at mollycoddle when it came time to World War I. I said we needed to start fighting and stand up for ourselves just like we did in the Spanish War, and why were we letting Britain do all the fighting against that authoritarian, Hunnish German government? And I urge my sons, the good-natured Warren, Quentin, and Theodore, and Kermit, and Archibald, to get involved in war like I did, to be a man! I even urged Quentin, who was so lovable, to join the war before the United States did, to get involved with the British. But he died behind enemy lines. Right? As it turned out, that Kermit committed suicide, and Theodore also died in the war for her. My one remaining son, Archibald, was the only one that survived, and he was also the only veteran who was 100% disabled both in World War I and World War II. So he became crippled. Woodrow Wilson never did let me lead the troops in World War I. That flubbed up. I would have died for this country. I cared about this country. I changed this country. But why did I tell my sons to die? Any questions? Kind of a tragic ending.